Hi, this is Barry Coombs from Computerworld. We're recording a webinar today on EUC in education, specifically around the challenges and the ever-increasing demands IT managers and IT facilitators inside education face around an end-user computing environment. I'm joined today by Spencer Pitts from VMware, who is the EUC Practice Manager. And we're going to be just taking you on a journey through these problems, these challenges that education environments are seeing, and then how VMware are working to change to allow you to manage your end-user computing environment. And a common misconception that people have around VMware and end-user computing is they only do virtual desktops, they only do VDI, which in reality, Spencer is going to take you through the many ways that VMware is able to assist you in end-user computing, specifically in the education sector. Now, for me, any IT environment within inside education has always been fraught with challenges. Generally inside education, you're expected to do a lot more with a lot less. You've got smaller IT teams, maybe smaller budgets than many corporate environments that are dealing with a lot less customers. Yet the expectations upon you to deliver IT are ever growing. VMware have recently done a survey looking at universities inside UK, and it's something like 43% of students are now considering what IT resources are available when choosing their university. And of 1/3 of those were willing to pay extra to go to a university that had the right end-user computing, the right technology available for them. And that's really kind of telling as to how important IT is to the students of today. And if you have a look at the requirement is ever growing, ever changing. Students, teachers are now expecting to be able to use your environment wherever they are, whenever they are. So maybe that's at home, that's in the breakout areas, in the canteen, rather than just in the IT suites. Which for IT managers, that gives a huge amount of change. How are you going to deliver those technologies? Do you need to go to a one-to-one user-to-device principle where you're having to deliver devices to users? How are the users going to support bringing their own device maybe? How are you going to keep the security inside your environment? But also looking at more than just the device itself, how are you going to deliver the networking resources? At Computerworld, we're seeing an ever-growing demand for campus-wide wireless. With bring your own device and enabling those type of learning environments, you need to have a wireless solution that is able to meet the needs of the mass influx of devices and also keep it secure to make sure that your education environment isn't outrun with viruses or there's individual problems. We'll be running other webinars focusing on the wireless side of it, but today we're going to focus on the VMware side, on the education side when it comes to end-user computing, and how we can enable an environment that doesn't have the traditional barriers of an IT suite method, but be able to support bring your own device, support cloud technologies. So I'm going to pass across to Spencer Pitts. What I'd like you to do during the webinar is use the question and answer facility. If you're watching the recording that's going to come later, feel free to reach out to your VMware account manager, or if you email inquiries@computerworld.co.uk, we'll get your responses to your questions. So I hope you enjoy the contents for our webinar. Thank you.
So, as Barry says, I look after what's called the end-user computing practice, EMEA, and I actually started off life as a public sector dedicated person when I first joined VMware back 8 years ago. So did a lot of work in education in terms of desktop management as well from a previous life. So walked quite a few miles in your shoes in terms of selling solutions and helping implement solutions in education. So as Barry said, and I've been working with Barry for a good 2-3 years now, I believe, Barry. So, but as you said, we're going to cover some of the what we see in terms of the VMware perspective of the market generally, but also some of the key challenges we see in education, specifically in the UK. So hopefully everybody can see my screen. I've got a quick agenda here, and as Barry says, we can take Q&A along the way, or we can do it at the end. So keep us honest and post those questions. So I'm going to give a bit of an introduction, scene setting, what we're seeing in the markets, and specifics around education in the UK. What VMware is actually doing to address something that we're now calling business mobility, and bear with me, I'll get into that in a second. Also, what we're doing in terms of our actual solution, how does that address some of the key questions we're seeing out there? So I'm going to go through some of the product offerings, some of the solution offerings. What I'm also going to do then, and this is where Barry's going to keep me honest and chip in here, but we'll talk about how VMware and Computerworld can come and help you guys if you've chosen the technology at this point, but actually make the project implementation a success, and how we go about rolling out this solution inside your organization. So we'll go through that in some detail later on. And then just a quick kind of, if you're going to do this, obviously there may be other people in the market. Hopefully at the end of this session you'll feel compelled that it should only be VMware you look at, but I'm sure that you'll have questions about, well, okay, why VMware, not somebody else? So hopefully we're going to cover that, and as we said, a bit of time for Q&A at the end. So in terms of scene settings, I mean, this is a pretty generic slide here. There's a bit of animation, so hopefully that came through on the presentation here. But I'm going to just approach it from a generic market perspective, not just education, and we're seeing this everywhere. There are nuances in different verticals, specifically in education, but really, when I'm speaking to multitudes of different customers across all different verticals, it's the same kind of resonating theme, which is end users now expect to be able to get applications on any device, and they expect to get their applications to access their data on any device. And potentially they're bringing in their own device. Okay, so we're seeing this common theme across pretty much everybody. And I actually come from a world where I guess I didn't like that originally. It was a case of, well, you get the device I tell you you're going to have, and I'm going to lock it down, provision it in a way that IT thinks is appropriate. And you can't bring in anything, you can't install anything else. And those kind of days are gone. I think Barry was alluding to this, which is we've got this pressure from people coming in. They're used to the world where they have applications, instant app catalog access in terms of the App Store, and when they go to Google Play, etc., they can just download this application and get access to it straight away. And regularly what we're seeing is they're saying, well, why can't IT give that to me? And specifically in education, why can't you guys actually deliver me applications on my device? Maybe I want to just work in halls of residence or something, and I want to get access to that application specifically there. Why should I have to go on a university or a school provision device? I don't know, those kind of potential questions here. But the common theme is the fact that gone are the days where we just say, you're getting this is how it is. There's pressures from users coming in and saying, I want it this way. And it's more about how IT can respond. However, there is a second side to this, of course, which is, yes, we want to give end users freedom and choice to kind of consume and work in the way that they're used to, potentially with consumer-type applications, but we still need to put some level of control and security around. So we want to open it up a little bit for them, but at the same time, we want to make sure that we can put some perspective in terms of, are you really allowed to get access to that app on that device? There may be specific situations where that's not appropriate. Maybe it's an application that the license agreement says it can't go outside campus, for instance. So, we want to put some kind of control around when you consume this application or even data itself. And the other key thing we're seeing, of course, is about identity. You may have Active Directory internally. Students come in and they can get access to services for Active Directory, but increasingly there's SaaS applications, things like, well, not particularly in education, but in some of the other verticals we see Salesforce. It's not really Active Directory as such, but we can integrate in that potentially. And the reason I mention that is the world isn't just about on-premise applications in education. It may be consumer applications that you go out and rent from some SaaS provider. So we need to make sure that we've got the ability to actually control that, but also make it really easy for end users to get access to it. All the time making sure the appropriate security, and more important, I guess, if the end user does actually phone up, can we manage what they're doing? Can we fix it? Can we report on it? Can we work out if there's problems? So all of that goes around the operational side of it. So it's kind of twofold, which is let's give access, let's give the freedom, let's give that experience to the end users, and specifically students and pupils in this case, but at the same time allow us to manage it. So that's the high level what we're seeing. Hopefully you guys are seeing something specific in your areas as well. But going a bit further down then, this is where we introduce what we call business mobility. Because although it is ultimately about a user accessing a device and an application on that device, really it's not about the device, it's about what does that enable them to do. And in your cases, to quote on what Barry said there, is it a case of now if I allow my pupils or my students to come in, access an application that allows them to work outside of core learning hours, does that have some kind of impact in terms of teaching, the amount of people you need to administrate at the back end? Does it mean I'm going to get more students coming in that want to come to this university? So it's more about what does it mean, and if you think about education as a business in this case, what does it mean to the business now? I'm enabling new ways of either staff or pupils or students to get access to these applications. So yes, it is ultimately about an app needs to run on a device, but really from the end user perspective, they don't really care. what it should be is like that becomes seamless to the user, and they're able to do stuff they wasn't before, or they're able to consume and use applications, which means they can do more things in their everyday lives. Yeah, it kind of makes sense when you think about it like that, but at the same time, we need to balance this with the need for you guys from the IT perspective to make sure that we're not just giving free rein to everything. We do put some control in there, but within the certain boundaries that we actually put in. And line of business is interesting here because you could equate this, I guess, to subsections within maybe universities that have got their own buying processes. It may even be they've got their own specific applications. So maybe there's specific projects in certain areas and certain colleges that may just want to do a specific application for a specific, maybe it's like civil engineering, for instance. How do we allow individual places like that to still be able to give access to their students, etc., but at the same time still within the overall control of IT as a whole campus, for example? So it's subtly changing the message here. It's not just about apps and devices. It's more about what does that mean to you guys providing that service to your end users and your staff and pupils. And this is just to summarize this. Business mobility is about the people and how they access their applications to allow them to do their work. It's not just about the devices. So some of the key challenges we've actually seen, just getting into the education side of here, device technical support, the amount of help desk calls that we're seeing. So we're looking not just in the UK here, but actually some of this is from the US as well. But it's common calls that we get, things like printing. How can I print from my device to a specific printer in, I don't know, a particular classroom, for instance? But the amount of device technical support, so that's somebody phoning up going, I can't do something on my device. Application updates. I mean, I used to, and this is when I'm going back 6-7 years, I did a lot of work back in a previous life where it was about rolling out your golden image using Ghost during the summer term or the holidays so that you can have that ready for when all the pupils come back from summer holidays. But it's that whole, how do I do application updates? How do I stop maybe potentially users from installing their own stuff and me having to roll it back to a good known configuration? But it's that whole, if we're talking Windows specifically, how do we keep that up to date and keep that operational so it's ready for use? And of course, security. I mean, it's not so, it is sensitive to a degree. It's a different kind of security in terms of education here. But maybe it is applications and data specific to maybe it's staff with names of students, etc., that we don't want to get out into the world, because if we leave a device and it's got the names of that, it could be seen as a security breach. So how can we have that sensitive information secured, but at the same time easy to access? And the work styles one for students is really important. This is the big growth area. The fact that no longer is it a case of I come in, I sit in the classroom, I get access to a device, it's sitting there, maybe it's a PC on the desk. People expect to be able to do stuff wherever, on the move. Barry mentioned Wi-Fi, obviously a key enabler here, but iPads, of course. iPads is just a device, but the fact is it's a mobile use case. I want to be able to access a particular application or whatever the device is and wherever I'm moving to. And maybe it's outside the campus as well, if the policy allows you to do so. And of course, the other thing here is some of actually the mobile devices are getting more powerful than some of the PCs that are sitting on the desk now. So gone are the days where that PC when you came in was better than the one you had at home or the one you were looking to buy. So things are changing in terms of how we do this. So hopefully you guys are seeing the same type of challenges. And clearly I wouldn't put these up if we didn't feel we had a solution to actually address these challenges. So I'll just pause there for a quick second, make sure there's no other questions. If not, we'll move on. I'll take silence as a no. I don't see anything in the chat.
No, we're all looking good at the moment. No specific questions.
Perfect. Thanks, Barry. Barry did mention a couple of these key points, and of course we'll let you guys have the slides afterwards. But I touched on some of these, but this is Kingston University specifically, and they had some particular challenges, and I'm going to pick a couple up here. So another one that we're seeing a lot is things like CAD and graphical type use cases. Now, you won't be surprised to know that some of the solutions we're going to be talking about are going to be your traditional app publishing. They're going to be things like virtual desktop infrastructure. And for those of you guys that have been around for a while, you'll know that there's been challenges along, let's say 6-7 years, which is kind of feels like how long I've been working with VDI, etc. And we'll know that there were always certain use cases that were not really good candidates, shall we say, for those particular technologies. And what's interesting now is because over the course of these 7 years, we've actually addressed most of these typical use cases, and now it means we can actually offer this solution properly. So things like graphic-intensive applications, maybe specific Linux Linux VDI desktop support, things like that. Now they're in the realm of what we can offer in terms of solutions. Clearly, VDI is a real key use case, publishing apps to mobile devices, etc. Anytime, anywhere access, whether it be campus, halls of residence, or maybe it says here international students. So we're seeing a lot of growth in terms of distant learning, etc. And people giving access to online courses and having to get access to those applications to do those online courses. And what's the best way to do that? Clearing, interesting. So when there's big scale up, temporary demand, so when everyone influx of students into the actual university, how can we stand up a lot of compute power just for that big influx of people and their applications, and then after that, can we quickly tear it down? So we're seeing, I'm going to allude to this later on, but potentially what we're calling desktop as a service for temporary peak demand, shall we say, and then after that, say 1-2 months, then we don't use desktops anymore, so we basically cut our access to the desktops. But the point being is how can I scale up and scale down effectively? And of course, the other thing here is how can I cut down the amount of support calls to your IT department? So there's some of the typical use cases and some of the challenges that Kingston was seeing. Hopefully that resonates with you guys as well. And like I say, we're happy to give this to you afterwards. So that's enough just for the time being on what we're seeing there. I put this slide up here. Hopefully you can all see this. It's a quick eye chart. Don't worry, I'm not going to go for every single piece. But the reason I put it up there is if I go back before this chart starts, probably actually about 6 months before that, if you'd approached VMware, our answer would have been, it's VDI. Okay, we still sell a lot of VDI, by the way, but what this chart is trying to tell us is the world has moved on just beyond VDI, and there's a lot of other use cases and a lot of other solutions that we can address. And now with the acquisition of big companies like AirWatch, Desktop, which is our desktop as a service platform, the fact that we launched app publishing and server-based computing capability last year with Horizon 6, desktop as a service offering with Horizon Air, some interesting acquisitions around something called Cloud Volume, which is around real-time provisioning of applications. So some really interesting acquisitions, and what it's trying to reinforce here is we're in this for the long term. VMware is no longer just a niche VDI player. We're now addressing what we believe is pretty much every type of use case in terms of end-user computing, and we've put a lot of investment in, and that's pretty much since our business unit leader, a guy called Sanjay Poonen, came along, where his stated aim is we want to be the leader in this area. It's not just about having a solution that runs on our core virtualization platform. It's about being the market leader in end-user computing. And I guess to reinforce that in a second, I'll show you some Gartner and IDC stats that talk about how they believe we are the leader. This slide, unfortunately, builds out animation-wise, so I'm hoping that translates quite well in the presentation. Let's just build that completely. So if you take the AirWatch piece, you take all the acquisitions we've made, all the innovation and the organic, growth in terms of our own products, we now have what we call the workspace suite. And the idea here is that we package together, and there is integration between all of this already, the key traditional desktop use cases, the key mobile use cases you would see with a traditional mobile or mobility player like AirWatch. And the thing that ties that all together is the fact that people want to share content, collaborate across those different platforms. So the reason why I'm putting this here is that actually we put this together in a suite that we can sell and implement, which brings together mobile on the traditional desktop side and the collaboration in terms of files that you want to share between different devices and content you want to share on different platforms. Underpinning that is the fact that this all works really, really well, and you won't be surprised for me to say it works better than anything else in terms of EUC on our own software-defined data center platform, we believe is a better solution. So we're leveraging technologies that we think can bring down the cost of storage. As an example, vSAN. Clearly we believe we're the best virtualization or cloud computing company in terms of the software-defined data center, and also new things like NSX from the networking perspective. So we believe end-user computing on software-defined data center gives us superior experience, better TCO, easier deployment, and a more integrated approach than, say, other leading competitors that maybe have a more of a mix and match approach with other types of platforms as well. Underpinning that in between is what we're calling workspace services. The idea there is that I have a shared catalog of applications between mobile and desktop, that I have single sign-on capability, which is really important. You want to make the experience for end users, students, pupils, and staff. You want to make sure that's as easy and seamless as possible. So the idea here is that we have an identity layer. So when I log in, maybe it's an Active Directory account, and then I get single signed on into a SaaS application for some particular application for civil engineering department, for instance. And then I can share that data seamlessly across those devices. The gateway is more about external access. Social is actually a little kind of gem in our portfolio, but think of it as enterprise social networking. And like I say, the catalog is the fact that I can have shared access of applications, whether they be SaaS, whether they be mobile, published, desktop, virtualized, etc., across all those different platforms. And from the side here, the user shouldn't really care. All they really understand is the fact that I go in and I get my apps and I get my data, irrespective really of the device. And IT gets a good handle of what's going on and can put the appropriate control and policy around it if needs be. And up the top here are the key verticals that we play into, and clearly from purposes of this presentation, education is one of our top verticals. And the reason for that is there's some clear use cases that we can address with the solution, just like there is in government in terms of flexible work styles. Healthcare is more patient care record system, doctors coming to bedside. So we've got some very key, good use cases and some reference architectures that we work with the likes of Computerworld on to help deliver this successfully, that we've done lots of times before, and we've got good references that we can share between the two companies. So it's a known entity from a VMware perspective, and education is one of our top verticals. So again, I'll just stop there for a second and just make sure that there's no questions.
No, I don't think we've got anything at the moment. There's a few that I've answered as we've gone along in the window, but we're good at the moment.
Okay, no problems. And I mentioned this slide before, and interestingly, I didn't really show this before it came out, probably because we wasn't top right, but now that we are top right. So this is IDC, just released the Magic Quadrant, if you like, equivalent. It's not as the leaders, the MarketScape. They've got different terminologies from Gartner and IDC. But the good news here is that VMware now is seen as the leader. You may be asking the question, why is the bubble smaller? That's basically revenues. Okay, so there's a lot of existing from our competitors' revenues. VMware is catching up there, but more importantly is we're seen as the leader in terms of capabilities and execution and where we're going with the solution going forward. We've got some really positive stuff from Gartner as well, because they don't really have a Magic Quadrant specifically for the sector, but they do comment on the capabilities, and some good statements there about how they consider us to be strong positives, so one of the leaders. And from an AirWatch perspective, there is a Magic Quadrant, and Gartner rate VMware up there, top right as well. So all good stuff from the analysts, just to prove the fact that this isn't, if you guys were thinking of investing in this, this isn't has anybody done this before? Is it really a known quantity? Hopefully you guys are really familiar and also confident that VMware can deliver. So what is the actual solution? So that's enough of the what everybody says, what the challenges are. What is the actual solution? So at a glance, I guess, and again, this is an animated slide. If we think about it from the end user's perspective, we're talking about presenting a logical landing place for where you access all your apps and data. Now, I called out some of the things here because it could be a virtual desktop. It may not be, depending on what the device is and the access method. It may be that you only have SaaS applications, whether they be internal or external. It may be that you've got Office 365 integration that you're looking to do as well. But the point here is that actually the user shouldn't really care what the back-end delivery mechanism, if you like, is. All they know is they go onto this portal, which is just the browser base, according to who they are, where they are, what access to apps they have, they get those applications when they click on them delivered in the most appropriate manner. And what we're showcasing here is we don't really care too much what they are. We're just trying to make it easier for the end user. So if we think about it from a student perspective, that whole flexible work style, being able to log on pretty much anywhere, if the policy allows you to do so, and getting access to your apps, whether that be bring your own device, whether it be a classroom PC, whether it be a mobile device in a library, ideally it should be completely seamless. And I put this in here because we get asked quite a lot, so okay, that's the desktop side, what about the mobile side? And what this is trying to illustrate here is actually, from the desktop side, it's a shared catalog. Clearly, I wouldn't see mobile apps on a desktop for obvious reasons. You can't really execute Angry Birds on a PC with the mobile app side, at least anyway. But you could potentially access an application, say a published Word, for instance, on a mobile device. So the idea here is that if the user goes to a mobile, an iPad, a tablet, Windows tablet, whatever it may be, they go to the app catalog, which is the AirWatch side, and they see the Horizon, the desktop applications, just in the same way that they would see if they logged onto a PC, a Mac, or a thin client. And it's SSO, so single sign-on. It's a key bit here. So I log on once. It might just be two-factor authentication. It may just be pure and simple Active Directory, username and password, and I get my applications according to who I am, what I'm allowed to see. They're in my app catalog. And underpinning it from the IT side is the fact that you get a view across the whole estate. You get all your applications displayed, who's logging on, when they're logging on, peak times, information, license information, etc., etc. So we believe we've got a solution that allows app delivery, content sharing between all those different device types, and kind of making it a lot easier for your students and your staff, and a really good way of managing it from back end in terms of IT. I also called out this one. I don't normally do this and call out specific solutions, but this one is really hot in education at the moment. So we have lots of clients that are now, like an iPad client, iOS, Google, etc. But we've got one specifically for Chromebook. And I call this out because I'm seeing a big demand in education and also actually in local authorities around Chromebooks. And the reasons are quite simple. You get a very highly capable, very shiny, and very whizzy as well. It's got a lot of user appeal. And it's low cost. And there's some, I think, Barry, you told me the price, the average price. I'm not sure if you're able to share that right now, but it's quite a low price point.
Yeah, I think in education you can get them as low as £150 from a lot of the manufacturers, and it's one of those things that can become quite affordable, but yet can still be quite flexible to allow students to work from home. Lots of the technology then allows you to track where the devices are and manage those devices. So as an education-specific device, when you've got the power of something like Chromebook with the entry point, with the management tools that are there, but then still having the ability to manage those Windows applications using the elements that Spencer's talking about, it becomes quite a good fit in education environments. So we're seeing quite a lot of uptake of that at the moment.
Yeah, and I think bridges a gap between it's quite cool. Right? I'd like to think everybody likes Google. Maybe not everybody, but I'm sure a lot of our students and pupils do quite associate with that. And as Barry says, we can still deliver the desktop experience to that at a really good price point with the manageability around it. So there's a specific VMware client, if you like, for Chromebook that allows us to do that effectively. And we're seeing a lot of demand. So this is, again, I guess, what you get in terms of the suite. And I'm majoring a little bit here more on the desktop side on the slide, but there are flavors in terms of how you can deliver desktops and applications. So there is the traditional VDI. I say traditional, it's almost like it's not brand new, but it feels like it's been around for a long time now. So there's VDI and app delivery, as you probably would know in terms of published apps. You get that capability with the Horizon 6 platform we mentioned. There's also the ability for you to maybe purchase that from a cloud provider. Maybe Computerworld can help you in terms of how you do that. But the idea there is that maybe you don't have on-prem. You actually pay per use. I talked about clearing as an example at Kingston Uni, where they could go out, purchase those X amount of desktops to cope with that demand for X amount of months and then not use that thereafter. But the big one we're seeing here, and this could be a good use case, and I am seeing interest in certain universities, is what we call a secure containerized desktop. So the idea where I don't have Wi-Fi access, maybe I want to download a university or a school corporate image or university image, education image. It's got some policy around it that I could run on my own device, not a school or university or college given device asset. And if we look at some of the use cases here, I've picked out, I think, Linux before. I'm seeing a big demand for Linux. So until recently, VMware was really, in terms of what we supported, application delivery and virtual desktops, it was really more Windows. Now we're seeing a big demand, not just in education, actually, but in things like oil and gas as well, and some graphical pieces, but Linux and developers use cases. And I know there's a lot of demand for Linux. And one of the things we've had is I really like the idea that I can do all of this publish remotely, etc., to any device. They need to include Linux. So this was really a call out to make sure that you guys are aware that we can now cover the Linux use case as well as the traditional virtual desktop. There's some other use cases here that are specifically on some other verticals, clearly point of sale is in education. Main office is more, think of it as campus. Remote office could be isolated, independent, maybe colleges, maybe it's halls of residence, etc. But the idea there is that you've got distant, low or poorly connected networks. You may want a kind of branch office type scenario. Clearly, mobile is a big use case. Non-employee in this case would be student, where they bring their own device. That's the key, I guess, use cases we're trying to call out here. And we think, as I mentioned before, that if you've gone back 2-3 years ago, we didn't have a use case and a solution for them. But now we believe we've pretty much got most of the biggest scenarios you're likely to come across covered, and we feel that between us and our partners like Computerworld, we can deliver you a really good solution to address these.
And I think one of the important things for me is when you're talking about bring your own device, it isn't just allowing people to bring their device into the organization, the education establishment, it's then enabling them to actually be productive upon it. Because traditionally, I think where organizations have enabled bring your own device, they're put on a separate guest network. They can't access any of the applications or data that are on the corporate network because we're concerned about viruses traveling onto the network. And I think when you start to use all these pieces of the puzzle inside the VMware suite, you can not only allow them to bring their device in it, but actually make them productive and allow them to access all those really important resources while still keeping a clear boundary between the education network and a bring your own device network.
Yeah, good points. Exactly the point. I mean, you mentioned, bring your own device there. It's almost a case of, you can bring it, but you can't really do much at all, to the point where actually there's no point bringing it and you end up resorting to the provided device. So you're completely right. This is all about allowing the same experience with the control, but at the same time, the user the freedom and the choice to bring in their own device without any compromises in terms of security. So I put this slide up here, which is really to outline what you get with the Horizon solution. The typical virtual desktop, which hopefully is going to address a lot of your use cases. App publishing, so maybe it's delivering a particular one Windows application to a mobile device for a student. You've got the flexibility of whether you want to consume that from a cloud or a service provider, or whether you want to have that delivered through partners like Computerworld on-premise. This unified workspace that means that we can seamlessly move through different devices and make it as easy as possible for your end users. The fact that we don't really care about these, I say niche, but they're not really niche, they're pretty widespread now, but the need for things like 3D graphics, multimedia, obviously quite highly used in terms of the education space, real-time collaboration, so that's things like unified comms. Those types of issues that traditionally were not good fits with the solution have all been fixed now. The offline use case we mentioned, and some new additions to the portfolio where we think the whole management piece, so VDI, published desktops, it's all great, but somebody's got to manage it. There's potentially, if we go back, there was issues around storage. There was issues around how we architect it. Lots of caveats, and it became quite complicated. And then there was the whole operational side. We believe now we've addressed a lot of the underlying infrastructure issues, but at the same time, we've made it easier for people to update apps. So to give you a scenario, I remember the times I mentioned it before, where you'd have to go in and you'd have an army of people running around with a Ghost CD uploading the latest image to make sure that was up to date, ready for when everybody came back off of holidays, and maybe that image didn't get updated on that PC until next year. Imagine now being able to completely update all your desktops, completely put the latest version of whatever that specific departmental application is, and do it, in seconds, and roll back in seconds if it all goes wrong. That whole flexibility in terms of how you guys manage that environment, and I guess the amount of people who use to manage it as well, so they can be focused on more innovation and more different ways of end users connecting and having more flexibility. So it's that whole operation side as much as the infrastructure side. And potentially as well, we think we can lower the cost in terms of the infrastructure side using things like the eVoRel or hyperconverged, or things like vSAN ready nodes in terms of the underlying infrastructure. So put that all together.
A question for you.
Going back 2-3 years ago.
Sorry, a question for you.
Yeah,
there,
sorry.
Spencer. When we're speaking to a number of education establishments, you have a small amount, or maybe a growing amount, that are kind of adopting a cloud first policy when it comes to their IT systems in education. So maybe they're looking at Google Apps or Office 365. What's your opinion on where VMware fits in with that strategy, where they're kind of looking at one of those main technologies and other cloud technologies? Where does some of this fit in still with that cloud technology, and where else can they look for VMware with a cloud first policy?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? So there's other people that do stuff, either cloud, maybe they be on-prem, and I guess with all of them, it always feels like you need to go the whole lot. So you don't get the maximum benefit unless you standardize on that one platform, which in a way kind of keeps you locked in. One of the powers here is that we're more of a, I don't know if this works, but Switzerland approach, where we kind of stay agnostic to that. So you remember my slide I put up first of all, it should be up to you guys whether you want to use your email online, whether you want to use, say, Google Mail or something. But actually, whether that's delivered internally, cloud first, you want a consistent way of accessing it that's kind of irrespective to the end user. And they don't really know that if they want to email, they have to go here, or if they want a local desktop, they need to go there. The idea here is that we kind of rise above it all. We almost universal broker across all those different types of delivery models. So if you do want to go cloud, great, we can still access it and we can be that layer that ties it all together. If you do want to go on-prem, great, we can deal with that as well. So I think it's flexibility ultimately, Barry, and it's a really good point.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. It's, from my perspective, it's that flexibility, it's that kind of hybrid mode that we're seeing across many kind of avenues in IT at the moment. You could go completely cloud first. You could sign up to use all of Microsoft technologies when it comes to 365 or something like that. But you normally find that you're then trying to wedge a technology to fit a use case and changing the way that the user ultimately wants to be able to work. Whereas actually where you're most successful is being able to blend the technologies that really do work natively in cloud with the systems that they want to be able to use today. But ultimately, as you're saying there, having a seamless way for those users to be able to access those applications, to make sure they're not having to log in with 10 different credentials, to make it easily accessible, no matter whether they're picking up their personal phone, they're going into an IT suite, or maybe they're doing a bring your own device. And that's, for me, the secret sauce that VMware is bringing to this, is that hybrid flexibility that's gelling this all together.
I couldn't have put it any better myself, Barry, so checks in the post, but yeah, completely. That's exactly it. It is that kind of almost rise above it approach and give flexibility, but at the same time make that experience as easy as possible and consistent across all the different types of entry methods you can think of in devices. That's the key. You're right. It is that put together. So on that, leads quite nicely onto here. This is just a high-level representation, if you like, of all the different components. So the entry method being this workspace portal, users from any device. I'm not sure if many students would have a Tesla right now, but the reason there is because that potentially has got a browser. I know that there's certain makes of fridges on the market that also have a browser. I'm not saying you'd want to access a virtual desktop from a fridge, but potentially, as long as it's HTML5 enabled. And the idea there is that we really don't care what that device is. You should be able to get access into your different applications, and underneath is a representation of how those apps could be delivered, whether they be, like you said, SaaS applications, Google apps, Office 365, whether they're internal or school or university internal applications on different Windows platforms, or whether they're virtualized. The idea here is that we kind of really don't care, but what we're trying to do is make it as easy as possible. And on the right-hand side and the left-hand side is, what about you guys that have to manage it? How do I fit that into my CMDB, into my support desk process? How can I plan for demand? How can I look at capacity, common issues? So you need that level of reporting. And maybe also things like self-service. Common requests, maybe it's a password reset. Maybe it's I need to get access to this application. So the ability to maybe automate some of those frequent requests and cut down the demand or the volume to your call center, or to your first-line support, I should say. So just a high-level representation here. Now, at this point, I'm going to move over to, well, that's all very good. There's a high level of how it could look like. So this is more of a, how can VMware and Computerworld help deliver it? So at this point, Barry, if you want to talk through the methodology that we work with each other about how we go to deliver these projects to the customer.
I mean, from my perspective, what I see more often than not when these projects go wrong, they're tackled by either individuals or maybe partners that are trying to tackle desktop virtualization or EUC in the same way that they tackled their server virtualization project. You've got a number of physical devices and you're looking to reduce that into a lesser number. Now, of course, when you're looking to do anything that is going to affect the user, you need to do it with a deal of consideration and careful planning, because no matter what you're going to do, if you're going to affect the way that user is able to work or be productive, you're going to end up with a failed project on your hands. Something that I think it was someone like Brian Madden previously said, if you're spending any money on end user computing, you need to be improving performance. If you're spending money and you're going to end up with worse performance, then you're wasting your time. Why are you even tackling it? So it's important when you're looking at end user computing projects that you do it in a methodical manner, a way that allows you to look to see how your IT suite is being used today. And again, what we find is those that assume that they know exactly how all their users are using their infrastructure are often the ones where the projects go worst. Because whilst we kind of believe or perceive we know how the users are using their machines, there will be another 100 use cases that we don't know, ways that people have found that they can use their machines that wasn't kind of as planned, and those will be some of the most important use cases. And within education, maybe teachers have planned classes around using the IT resources in a certain way, and if we limit that, a great example is maybe we assume that no one is using real-time audio and video, nobody is using the webcams on their machines, but then we were dealing with some education establishments that were doing some stop motion recording as part of a class planning exercise. And if you move that straight into VDI without any planning and you've made that assumption, it's all going to fail. So where we recommend we start is by assessing what you have today. We're able to do that with a desktop assessment process. There's two ways of doing that. There's a shorter, much reduced method that we're able to do alongside VMware and Lakeside software that gives us a very high level result as what's going on in your environment. And it gives you the ability to go in with some amount of confidence as to how do we proceed with this project? What's it going to look like? What's the cost going to look like? How are we going to implement it? What do we need to consider? And then we're also able to go into a much deeper dive where we're able to look into individual process utilization, look at 3D graphics performance to really understand how your users are using their desktops. We're able to have a look at ages of machines. We're able to have a look at what problems are actually affecting the user. What is their user experience today? So does it take 15 minutes for a certain user to log in? Why is that? Maybe they're a good user to get on board. We tend to do this in a number of ways. So obviously I've spoke about using the agents to be able to go out there with Lakeside software, with VMware and assess the environment. But we also like to speak to the users. So maybe that is going to be a small amount of students. Maybe you've got an IT working committee that includes some key students and staff. Let's understand their challenges. What do they believe needs to be improved inside your environment? And we can help facilitate those type of conversations. We then kind of look to move on to a design. How are we going to tackle what is going on inside your infrastructure, the problems that you've identified and your goals, and design a solution that is going to be able to meet these goals, meet these objectives, but most importantly for me, is it's going to fit inside your budget. We could spend all the time on the earth doing these first few stages, but if we don't understand what you're trying to achieve and within what budget, we're wasting our time. So we need to be working closely with our customers to be designing a project that is going to work for them, that is including the right technologies. And don't forget, those of you that may have looked at VDI before and have discounted it because it's too expensive, things have changed. VDI, the cost of VDI, as Spencer's been touching on, has been coming down because of a number of the technologies VMware has been introducing. But VMware can do a lot more than just VDI. Again, as Spencer's mentioned, we can help you manage your existing physical desktops. We could just look at how you're integrating cloud applications, and that design will be able to take those elements into consideration as well. What we like to do at that point is also introduce the ability to have departmental champions. So around your educational establishment, maybe there's someone in the science department or someone that is in English that maybe they're not IT experts, but maybe they're willing individuals that want to help you make sure this project succeeds. With their buy-in, we're able to allow us to test our design as we go into a proof of concept stage to make sure that the deployment that we're putting out there meets those objectives, and we're able to iron out any bugs before we end up on mass adoption. And then when we start to go through mass adoption, we're then able to make sure with those users, with the users in the organization that have been onboarded, how are things going, assess how the rollout is going, make tweaks as we go through before we end up with mass then deployment to the whole environment. Now, what is important is once you get to that stage, and as you're going along that stage, we have the ability to just ensure that the environment is continually working as required. It's still meeting those objectives, and that's really important, where some of the VMware tools then come in, allow us to do that continual assessment to make sure ultimately that user experience is where it needs to be, and the users are able to be more productive with this new end user computing technology you've implemented, and not less productive.
Thank you, Barry. And I think we've got up on the screen here some of the repeatable methodology that we share between each other. So one of the good things here, of course, as a valued partner in Computerworld, we talk a lot. There's instances of joint book writing, I seem to recall, Barry. So we're closely linked, and there's a lot of shared best practice and repeatable delivery methodology. So a close working relationship with the likes of Computerworld. So just as a kind of, I'm keeping honest on time here then, Barry. So just wanted to, I guess, summarize what we just talked about, and why VMware, why not somebody else here, and why also, why not do this with somebody else and with another partner? So why VMware and Computerworld, I should say. So from an actual product and a portfolio perspective, these are the highlights for us, because yes, there are other people that do very similar things, but what we believe that we bring to the market here is we believe we've got the best underlying platform. We think we've got some of the best innovations and the most trusted as well in terms of maturity and capability in terms of compute virtualization, network virtualization, and storage virtualization to give you that platform piece. The fact that we've got pretty much, we believe, all of the different delivery mechanisms covered in terms of whether you want cloud first, to Barry's point, or hybrid. Maybe it's that seasonal demand I mentioned in terms of the clearing use case for Kingston University, or the on-prem, the traditional, or even that new kind of working where you've got students maybe that are offline, don't always have network connectivity. Could be a scenario there, but we've got that flexibility, and we believe a solution that covers all of those key use cases. And when we look at the delivery of applications and the content, how we manage that, how we kind of see what's going on, make sure that it's working once we've done all the good assessment, etc., that Barry mentioned, but the smooth operation, if you like, we believe we've got competitive differentiation and a lot better end-to-end solution in terms of how we manage it, the ongoing piece, and also lots of choices, and probably, I'd say, the most innovative ways that allow you to really change the game in terms of how you deliver those end-user services to your end users and pupils and staff, etc. So that's, I guess, from a platform when you look at Horizon. And of course, we are talking EUC here, we're talking business mobility, so we're including the AirWatch side. If I look at their, apologies here, lifted and then shifted directly from their slides here, their key kind of differentiator is pretty much every endpoint you can think of. They've got manageability over from an MDM perspective. They cover pretty much every single operating system in terms of the client, how they can manage and put control around that. And again, like us, they've got pretty much every use case covered up in terms of bringing your own device, etc., and university and educational use cases.
So I think from my perspective, from a Computerworld perspective, Computerworld are end-user computing specialists. That's what we do. We have been doing end-user computing solutions for some time now between us all. We are a VMware-focused partner when it comes to end-user computing, but we also have the skills and knowledge on Microsoft technologies, infrastructure technologies, networking, wireless, all those elements to help you bring together your end-user computing solution more than just from the VMware technologies. We have a team of end-user computing-focused engineers to help design and assess what is going on. And we have a type of working relationship with VMware, as Spencer has mentioned. So we're able to help educate you as to what the technology looks like. If you'd like to see any of this actually working, we have demonstration facilities that we can either bring you into our head office facilities or we can bring to you. And then we're able to move along the process, working with VMware to give you that reassurance that the technologies that we're recommending for you, that we're implementing for you, are going to meet your objectives at the end of the day.
Perfect. And I've just put this slide here. I mean, it happens to be a specific reference on higher education, but there's a lot of similarity across the other types of education establishments. But key one here is in terms of students are now limited to just doing work for specific courses on certain lab hours, because I remember when I went to university, that definitely was the case. And you had to kind of book in your time. It wasn't exactly something you could get on. You couldn't guarantee a seat in front of a PC. So that whole way that we offer that service out completely changed. Faculty now, rather than the faculty having to worry about how their students get access, now they've got a lot more flexibility. They don't really have to worry in the same way. They can concentrate on the teaching side more so than the actual, what I need to worry about IT. Are the apps deployed? Does it take 15 minutes to get everybody up and running before I even start the class or the lecture? And the other key bit here is you guys, in terms of the support, the IT department behind it, you've got more time now to start introducing more innovative ways of attracting more students potentially in the education side, in terms of making sure that they come to your university rather than somebody else's, as an example. And you can do it potentially, contentious here, but potentially with less resources. And I don't mean that means you need to cut everybody. That's not what we're saying here. We're saying that you can spend less time on those menial tasks and get on with the more innovative things that really push forward your offering to your students, etc. And there's some links here, and there's lots of references on the main VMware page. Obviously, Barry's got some people he's worked with specifically in terms of joint engagement, but clearly there's a lot of education type use cases that are public references. So with that, I think that kind of brings us up to the top of the hour.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Spencer. I hope that has given everybody an overview of obviously the challenges which you're probably more than aware of that you're facing today. Hopefully some of those have resonated with you, but hopefully it's highlighted how VMware can assist you on this journey from more than just a VDI perspective, which I think is the way that VMware is often perceived, that if you want to go with VMware, you're going down the VDI route. It's much more. It's a fully encompassing strategy that VMware have, that they're not dabbling with, that this is one of the key areas of their business, and they're able to help you define a whole end user computing strategy from VDI, but also managing your existing physical desktops with Mirage. We're also federating cloud applications. We're managing access to those applications, as well as managing mobile devices with AirWatch and things like that. So I'm hoping it has been useful for those of you that have watched or are watching the recording afterwards. If you've got any specific questions or you'd like to see demonstrations, please reach out to your Computerworld account manager or visit computerworld.co.uk. We can also broach discussions with VMware if you'd like to speak directly to them. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much, Spencer.
No problem, Ben. Do we want to take time for Q&A, or are we pretty
we might have a few questions just coming through. Let me have a look. So I've got one here. If using VDI, are there any restrictions on the hardware on the desktops, or would it be a useful way to give extra life to clients?
Great question. I know how I'd respond to that. I'm not sure specifically from your side, Barry, if you dabble in that.
Yeah, that's fine. So there's a number of different ways that you can reutilize existing PCs, and generally, as long as they're not too old, they will meet the requirements more so than a lot of the thin clients on the market today. The only time we have had problems is where there are CPUs in existing PCs that are extremely old, and I'm talking Pentium 2 and things like that are unable to meet. Sorry, what's that?
I said that is going back then, but you're right. There's certain SSS chipset enabled features that you require for like protocol, but you're right. We are talking 10, 12 years ago.
Exactly. So, and I like to raise it because we have had a problem with probably one or two customers where we've just agreed to using old PCs. All of a sudden you see what comes out of the cupboard, and you do end up with a few issues. But generally in an education environment, most PCs you're going to have around could be repurposed as thin clients. That can be done in a number of different ways. We can either roll out group policy to those to really lock them down and only run the VMware Horizon View client, or we're alternatively able to put a thin client operating system on them using something like Wise or Tenzig software that actually turns them into what we call a fat client. Clearly, they don't have all the advantages of a thin client. They're still using the same amount of power, same size, same heating and cooling, but you're able to manage them as if they were a thin client with a central management software, and there's very little that you can do to change what is going on the machine. So,
I call them chubby clients at that point.
Chubby clients, like it. Are there any other questions for anyone else that is currently on the call? I don't think there is at the moment. So, yeah, thank you very much then, Spencer.
Thank you, Barry. Thanks, everybody, for listening to this as well. Happy to take questions later on. We'll, like you say, get in touch with us, and I think we're going to make this slide deck available for everybody afterwards, yeah?
Yeah, we will make the slide deck. There'll also be a recording, and we're also going to be sharing the Kingston case study with everyone so they can understand a bit more about what worked for them there.
Perfect. Thank you, Barry.